Hello, and welcome to Code and Pixels with Kelly and Adekunle. Today, we'll be chatting with TJ Pitre about AI and design systems.
Thanks, Kelly. TJ is a product architect, AI, and design systems at Figma. Hey, TJ, thanks for being on the podcast. How are things going?
Going well. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Let's get into our first question. We like to kind of talk about people's career paths. So can you kind of talk about kind of a good overview about your career path from how you started to where you're at?
All right. How long do we have? I'll give you the fast track version. So in my entering college before college days, I thought that I was going to be forever. I thought even since childhood, I thought I was going to end up being a comic book artist. That was like the trajectory where things were going because it was one of those things where it felt like a hobby was truly starting to manifest itself into a career. And even though like my parents were adamantly against it because they were really wanting me to get into like HVAC and like a trade or something like that, because that's kind of like where my family comes from. Uh, I was pretty adamant about it, and I remember sending off a couple of portfolios to Image Comics in Anaheim, California, and getting like some like serious rejections, like some things that were like, okay, I'm not adequate. I don't fit the bill for being a part of this. So quickly parlayed that into graphic design, and then learn all my way through kind of like the Adobe suite. And then I remember I was doing like logos and branding for a lot of local places here in New Orleans. And it was a company called Stafford Talon Stone that asked me to do their branding and stationery package, but she loved it. She still uses it to this day, which is great. It's like the most flattering thing. I'll drive by on Magazine Street and I see the logo hanging as this giant wooden sign outside. And and then she was like, "Can you make me a website?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." And I was like, "I have no idea how to do it, but I know I have the tools to do it." So sure enough, I fired up Fireworks and like designed it, and I made it all in Flash and I exported that Swift file and then sent it off to her. And she was like, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." And she kept that up for like 10 years and it was great. But then I think that was like the gateway drug into development because I was doing a lot of tweening in the timeline and Flash. And then so I kind of got more into JavaScript, which like I already had the HTML and CSS stuff because I was peeking behind the scenes at what Dreamweaver was generating when I would export the fireworks designs. And then those kind of things came together. And then from that point, it just led into front end design and development. So I kind of had the design background, and then now I'm like positioning myself as like a budding front end developer. And then ended up graduating with a multimedia design degree, which basically means like we don't really have a specific niche here. It's just such a kind of like all multimedia, whatever it is. And then that kind of gave me the opportunity to pick and choose where I wanted to go. So I did some internships at some local agencies doing both design and development, and then landed at Emeril Lagasse, big chef here in New Orleans, BAM guy, and I was his webmaster, which I guess is like the modern day full stack developer. And so I was just doing it all for him. Martha Stewart came and acquired the marketing and like e-commerce portion of his empire, and that was the department that I had belonged to. So then that moved me up to New York, and then at New York I worked for Martha Stewart, worked my way up to director of front end design and development over there, and then so that's when like the topic of what we'll be discussing today kind of started. So this is where like component based design and pattern library started, because if you can envision like the physical Martha world was very organized. Like everything was in its place, like the like down to like the bookshelves and just the way the magazines were sorted, and just the whole area that we worked in was just it was called the Starrett Lehigh. It was a beautiful area that we worked in. We had multiple sites that were all using a themed architecture. So we had a parent theme, we had all these ones that were inheriting the same theme, but they were using different brand CSS that was updating styles. And then left there 15 years ago, and then started this business, Southleft. And then we were doing component libraries and design systems since that point on. And then about 2 years ago is when we started to shift to an AI first approach for everything. And then incorporating overlaying AI supported methods on traditional design systems workflows, and trying to figure out how we can like optimize it and just continue to optimize it over and over until we got to where we are today, which is like this all these little tools and methods and things that we do internally. A lot of it we've open sourced externally. Figma Land Design Systems Assistant, Figma Console, MCP, Company Docs, and several others that people use, and I get a lot of thanks for them. And yeah, I think that's kind of what led to the Figma conversations.
I love the idea where you kind of talking about the progress overall, but I'm wondering, like, what's your day-to-day look like overall?
My day to day, so at the time, I just started at Figma recently. Before Figma, my day to day was mostly running Southleft as CEO. Um, at the point of when I left as CEO, I wasn't really taking on projects. Most of what I was doing was um, uh, managing business side of things, and then doing um, a lot of the content that we put out. The majority of business that came to us was either through referrals or like lead magnets. So like we put out the Substack, the website blog, the LinkedIn posts. All those things would solicit a lot of inquiries. So those inquiries would come in, and then we'd take some calls, and then see like if there were opportunities or engagements that we could possibly work out and kind of turn into projects. And then we'd shift that to the team to kind of work through it and get an estimate and proposal going, and then ideally engage in a project with them. But the majority of my time was probably spent doing a lot of stuff like this, like just like chatting with friends within the network, and then talking a lot about AI and design systems, and then really just doing whatever we could to not gatekeep the things that we were doing internally that could help people externally who are going through the same questions. Because we recognize that like the AI influence has a lot of noise around it, and we it's hard to like say like we figured it out because no one has. And I truly believe that anybody who's like posting things on LinkedIn or any social media who's like, yeah, comment DS and design systems and AI to get my PDF and sign up for my workshop is the indicator that you probably haven't figured it out. Like this is stuff that we're all collectively working through. And if you don't put stuff out there that shows both the things that are working and aren't working, then it seems like uh, uh, I don't know, like then it just it feels like the most transparent and honest way to put things out there to allow other people who are kind of in a vulnerable state because they're just constantly feeling this overwhelm of the onslaught of AI progress and all these people who are claiming to be like 10xing their design and development teams because of AI. And we just wanted to be like show them what we're doing. Like, here's the things that worked. Here's the things that didn't work. Here's the tools that we're creating to make them work, or hopefully make them work, or at least like move the needle to like prevent risky output. And I think that's what helped out a lot. So that was where most of my time was spent in like the last 2 years.
Cool. I wanted to talk a little bit about how design systems and AI kind of work together. Like, how do you see design systems helping create better context for AI?
That's a great question. And I think that is something that has evolved over time. In the beginning, when we would use AI, it was when we would leverage AI within a traditional design systems approach, it was really to fill the gaps that felt like were the parts of traditional design systems workflows that people just were okay leaving unresolved. And like this is the elusive, this is the design to development handoff and all the potential friction that happens there with like lack of communication or like the bifurcation from the design to the development or parity issues. And that was the elephant in the room that we're like, what could we do to leverage AI to help like bring these two decrease the distance in this gap at least, or maybe even try to overlap them somewhat or make them like kind of commingle a little bit. And so that was the first thing that we would tackle. The first thing that I remember working with was on a larger design system project. And we were working with a colleague who had created this Rust application that would allow us to like fill out a YAML file, and we would put like the name of the component, the like a brief description. This is like the front matter that would happen at the top of like a markdown file. We were using YAML at the time. And then we would put all of the properties and states and variants as like key value pairs in there. And then there were like some AI considerations for the AI to understand when it was like doing the transition from design to development. So that was like the first baby step into putting like, what can we do to facilitate this design to development process? And then like get us like, our hopes weren't high. It wasn't like we were expecting to just like nail it 100% every time. We were doing this on like very primitive components, like just banners, tags, buttons, labels, things that didn't have many dependencies. And it would get us like modestly like 30% of the way there. So it just felt like, okay, this seems like over time, these efficiencies will accumulate, and then this will eventually be something that would make our workflows more optimized and more efficient. And then as the progression of AI just got smarter and more accessible, then we just kept thinking like, all right, what if we tried this? And what if we tried this? And then like when the emerging of like agentic systems came out, like when there was like methods for that were like beyond chat, and we were able, because at that time we were using like VS Code in like a extension called Rue or something. I remember it was short lived. It might still be out there. And then Cursor finally came out, and then we started using Cursor, and then Cursor had shell access and it could read the shell and it had the chat window. So then we built this thing called it was called Figma Bridge, which is the name of the plugin now that exists within the Figma console MTP. So kind of paying homage to it. But it was an extension in VS Code that allowed us to put a canonical link to a component set from Figma, and it would it used the API to download just the components back. And then the AI within Cursor would read that, and then it gave them like a full picture of, we would also send it like a screenshot of whatever the component was that we were trying to develop. And it did a really good job. It was like, so like incrementally things just kept getting better and better. And there was a point where it felt like the tables had turned, like something had tipped. And it's like we had allotted time for developers to be like, let's go deeper into this and see exactly what type of tooling that we can really do that like really move the needle, turn up the dial, so to speak, and see if we can fully automate this system. Not necessarily automate it, but like see if we can actually create a system that connects the dots between like every layer within the traditional design systems workflow. And that kind of brought us to where we are today. Like that was like the whole path to get to just like layering on just whatever else we can. And I think this is maybe a little bit distant from the original question, but it's like our method is called context-based design systems. And the way that we do it is like we like to say, it's a very responsible way of layering on AI within the traditional design systems workflow, because it's like, it's human centered, but AI supported. And then like, I think where things seem to be going towards is like this like agentic method of design systems assembly or management maintenance. And that part is the part that feels like this is the sentient design system, like the one that feels like it's just like, it feels like the open claw world to me. It's like I dabbled in it for a little bit, but then like if I send it on a task, and then it starts doing other tasks that were maybe not things that I had asked it to do, or it's just kind of making up its own mind when it decides without my approval, that's like the AI walking you. There's just something about not having a human in the loop part that makes me a little uneasy.
Yeah, sentient design systems kind of terrify me. But
It's a
just waiting for like a
scary
Terminator
sentiment.
design system to come alive, and then suddenly things are starting to update on their own, and before you know it, it's like, well, what
Right.
happened to my original components?
It's risk assessment, and is a big part of like how we tackle design systems, and the amount of risk to me outweighs the just autonomously allowing something to manage something that just feels like it requires so much attention. It almost it almost feels like it belittles the value of design systems practitioners. Like, oh, we can just have an agent do it. But there's a lot of design systems that we've worked with for these larger organizations that have really, really, really complex components that exist within these node packages that we put together for these systems. And I have yet to encounter an agent that can build a really advanced data table, like not autonomously anyway, not without some human oversight. But I don't know. Somebody prove me wrong.
I mean, I tried it already and it didn't work. So it's
It's almost
but
like you
it's
have to
like,
treat it like an application. It's its own beast.
yeah, it's just like you have to do it directly because it was like building a data table and then it started building the pagination. But no, just focus on this first. Because again, it's like that's a whole separate component. And they're like, oh, what about this and that and servable? And it's like, okay, let's take it one step at a time and whatnot. So
Yeah, and then it starts making its own stuff up, and then it's like rebuilding buttons, and it's like, no, we're like, you import that button. Like, we already have it. We've been through this. That's why I like context-based design systems, because like when you have sessions, like after each session, it logs the session as markdown files, so that way you know where you're at, and then the next time you pick up a session, you can either resume the previous session, or you can start from where you stopped before by it reviewing what it had just done through the documented markdown files, and then start up again. So it just has like all of the built up context from when you start. Because the approach of context based design systems is when you start with just primitives, and it's just kind of like that Russian doll of you start with a very like inner part, and then you layer on all the parts that have like more dependencies. And it's a very responsible way of putting everything together to where you get to the data tables and the date range time pickers and all the things that have like a lot of functionality built into them. When you get to that point, it kind of already has all that institutional knowledge of like, all right, these things exist already. Now we just have to string together the functionality.
Sometimes when I'm working between two different repos, I have two different cursor windows and they don't talk to each other. So I actually use that as a way to get different approaches that way. Cause I'll say, like, in this repo, how would you do this? And I'll jump to that cursor instance and ask the same question to see, is it going to say the same thing or is it going to say something different?
You
That's
get
going
differing opinions. There's a little trick that I don't know if it's a little trick, but there's like whenever I'm running like intense sessions. So let's say I am building a data table, and this is like me monitoring the AI, and maybe I'm working through something like Claude Code or Cursor, and the data table is going well, and then it says it's finished, and then I'm looking through it, and I'm like, I'm QAing the data table, making sure the functionality is all there. And then I'll ask it, I'll say, like, what are you least confident in right now from this session? And it feels like AI will confidently lie to you. Like, it'll be like, I'm done and this thing is great. like no notes, everything looks great here. But then when you ask it that question, it's really funny because it'll go back through like the history of everything that it just did and then tell you what it should have told you. Because we've all experienced AI. AI is your biggest hype man. Like all they want to tell you is what you want to hear. And it really depends on the language model provider. Because I feel like with any GPT related AI sessions, they're more likely to tell me what I want to hear. So I've always had to add personalization settings in there to be like, look, I need you to chill out on on the hyping me up. Like I am not right all the time. I do a similar thing with Claude, but since I use Claude mostly for like the code and analytical things and like logic, I ask it to be critical of my questions, and then I ask it to be critical of its response. So it'll run through a thing and question its response, and then give me like a pretty objective point of view on what it is. But even that being said, I'll like asking it like, what do you think the least confident thing that you did from this session is right now? And it's really interesting what it'll return.
yeah, that's actually a good tip. I'm definitely going to try to steal that. A lot of times I've done before, I'm like, I just YOLO it and I'm like, Claude, like it should know. And then I put up a pull request and someone's like, hey, is the reason why we did this? And I'm like, let me ask Claude. And then, anytime you ask Claude, they're like, oh yeah, you're right. We should have done this way. And I'm like, if you knew it, then you should have just done
Why
it
did you
that way.
tell
So
me?
exactly. So I think like having a way where it could be more critical is always important because again, there's some people they don't know and they just like letting things go and they don't understand that Claude might do something wrong or might not do something more efficient. So I think that's kind of the case where you just have to be very cautious about it and also just verify.
Especially when it's like heavy logic and like we keep using the data table example, but it's like there's a lot of stuff in data tables because it's for some of these data tables that we built in the past, it's almost like you're recreating spreadsheets. Because it's like you do like some of them that we've done, it's like you have to do calculations in the table cells and like there's another. So like after I ask it after a long session, I feel like what's the least confident from the session that you feel right now. After I get a response from that, I'll ask it, what's the biggest thing that I didn't realize about this session right now? And then so that will tell me like from my prompt, what I was going back and forth or what should have I asked? And like so like tell me the missing pieces. And that sometimes unearths some things that were like, oh, like I missed that. And that's on me. Like this is probably something that I should have been more considerate about when I was, engaging for this specific component or whatever the purpose is, the application that you're working with Claude to, or whatever AI, working with any language model to help build out.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think it's always cool to understand the nuances of like how to make the most of AI. I do want to jump into a question around. Obviously, you were CEO of Southleft, and you kind of made an announcement that you're joining Figma. Without getting in any legal trouble, could you kind of give a good overlay of like, hey, what was the reason to make that jump?
But there wasn't anything within my position at Southleft that made me want to leave it. In fact, like arguably Southleft's doing the best it's ever done right now, and the work that we're doing is meaningful work, and it's work that like the team loves doing, and pipeline's good, and everything just felt right. My position as CEO in Southleft was more of what I was kind of explaining earlier, where it was like kind of like working on thought leadership and then thinking about things that we're doing internally that weren't project specific, that was more like cross project that we can take a look at, maybe refactor a bit to make it more general and then open source it and then talk about it and see like where it lands and like who it helps within the design systems community. And I think through that, just that giving out of information, something eventually had probably caught Figma's eye. I don't know what particular thing it was. So they had reached out earlier in January. I would just having just real casual conversation. Like it wasn't anything that was really specific about like, this is something that we're looking for. And it was like kind of just feeling each other out on, like where the current state is of AI and design systems. And then we just kept talking and then kind of like one thing led to another. And we got to the point to where it felt like there was a good alignment with what the stuff I was doing for the community, that I could work with Figma and then help Figma do a lot of that stuff too. And then, long story short, well, actually, it was a long process to get there. But yeah, June 8th was my start date, and then now my current position is product architect of AI and design systems, which I believe is the one and only. So right now, my main role over there is to assess the landscape of design systems from within Figma, and then work on them internally to help tooling and address the needs of the design systems community.
That's
Cool.
really cool. You're the only one. Like a unicorn.
As of now, so like we'll see. I'd love to see, just selfishly, I'd love to see like more design system practitioners, and I'd love to see more attention to design systems community being had throughout a lot of these organizations and these. I think it feels like a very popular, like a high moment right now within design systems in general. I guess across the board in every industry, there's a lot of applications coming out just because, vibe coding and whatnot. But specifically within design systems, it feels like there's a lot of tooling coming out. Overall, it's just an exciting time within design systems. And I think AI has a lot to do with it. I think it's helping a lot of people's individual workflows as well as, some of these larger design system, ecosystem management stuff, which is kind of what the console MCP was made to do.
Yeah, I believe you mentioned that designers can go from Figma to pull requests now. Do you think the handoff model is dying between designers and developers? How do you see that workflow kind of evolving now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So earlier I mentioned context-based design systems workflows. I'm still of the mindset that the creativity is best expressed through whatever means you're most comfortable in. So if you have a vision and your creative outlet is code, then by all means, who am I to say don't start with code? I think I speak for a lot of us when we say like a lot of creativity is expressed through mine is like a notepad. I probably start best with a sketchbook, and then I think that just happens to be just like muscle memory. Um, but I think a lot of people these days are probably the canvas. I think a canvas is a very comfortable place to start with some vector boxes, and then layering on some things, and then allowing them to take shape until they reach a certain point, and then you're allowed to leverage the functionality of the tool that you're in to shepherd those things along into whatever they'll end up manifesting as code or art or whatever it might be. Um, in a Let's just say we're working with traditional design systems approaches where we start in a tool like Figma, and then it gets kind of like the handoff to the next discipline or the next layer, which would be like the coding of that component. And then there's like a series of checks and balances and pull requests and things that happen to end up packaging it up to making its way into a product engineering environment where those components are imported and then used within the end product. The context-based design system method is one that it could start with any canonical source. You could say code, you could say Figma, but for the purposes of this conversation, we'll say everything's going to start in Figma. So one of the things that we like to do with this approach, because the stakes are so low and because we have technology like MCP that tethers the canvas to code, we encourage we encourage product designers to do that first draft of a coded component. The biggest thing that I've seen in the last 15 years of working with design systems, amongst all the organizational and like political and cultural things that happen within organizations aside, when it comes to the actionable items, where it's like there is a designed component set that needs to eventually make its way into a coded component set that's interactive, that can actually be hooked up to things to be interactive in some kind of way. The first pass by a product designer making its way into that first draft of the component automatically takes away one of the biggest friction points in a traditional handoff. And a lot of that usually stems from like transitions and animations and what we like to call designer's intent. So like there's an intentional experience that designers want when they're working with buttons or anything that has any states that are outside of just static. So like if there's a toast that has a dismissal state, and then like maybe it's like a time to dismiss, and then maybe it just blank goes away. Maybe it drifts down, maybe it bounces out or something. There's a specific reason why the designer is intending it to work or function that way. There's usually a lot of hang up when it goes to the developer, because the developer typically doesn't understand that designer's intent or that vision, because there's so much complexity and nuance in the milliseconds that it takes for an animation delay to begin, so that way they understand when the opacity from 0.5 to 0 happens, and then when the bounce starts, and then what the easing equation is for that. And not to say that the developers that are inheriting this work don't care about that stuff, they do, but they're also having their sights set on like the next thing, because a lot of what their next thing is going to end up being like end-to-end testing and unit testing and packaging and modeling and versioning and all the stuff that happens in like the other gap, which is like the component development to the making its way into the product. So I love it since the designers can leverage these tools like MCP they can continuously iterate on that in like a storybook type environment or a prototyping environment where they can do the interactions and test all those things on their own. And then they'll work off of something like a design branch. And then since they have agentic methods of communicating with Git, they don't really have to learn like every single Git command. They can say, the top 5, Git, push, merge, pull, commit. And then so they can use an agentic method if you're using something like a GitHub CLI, then you can say, commit this and push it, make a pull request, and then it'll do it, assign it to, Chris in engineering. And then that's when the engineer who would then take it from there, review the pull request, and then apply organizational best practices and coding standards to it. And then, because then they start to assume the role of would be like a context engineer. They pull that stuff in, and then they do their version of, how they work with AI, which is a lot different from how like a product designer might work with AI. And then that's kind of like the whole, that's the connecting of the gap right there to me. It's like when a product designer can actually make that first draft of the component, the coded component, then they've actually contributed to the end product. Because if they don't, then it's like the designs are really just documentation, visual documentation for the person who's doing the coding of the component.
Yeah, I was gonna say especially for designers, I think the whole idea is to make sure you bring the experience to the UX. So, and with all these tools, no one's gonna have more of the eye for animation of what feels right versus a designer. For a developer, I'm just trying to get this done so I could worry about other stuff. So I
Yeah,
think
I got a
makes it
deadline
where it's
ahead.
yeah,
This is going to roll out in 2 weeks, and I haven't, and I need to get it to the engineer so that way they can hook it up to the endpoint, so that way data can flow through it. But I think that's what's referred to now as taste, and I think the best person to judge the taste is going to be the person who who had the creative vision for the things that were intentionally added to this component. And I think we cut down on iterations over time, especially if this is several, a typical component library is somewhere between 60 and 130 components. So if you do that for every interactive component, then I see a lot of benefits, a lot of time saving if they're comfortable with going with that method. Because I understand there's a lot of I want to stay in my own lane type of designers, and I can respect that too. But some are very curious about how can I contribute more, and we love seeing that.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, to close out the episode, I'm wondering, do you have anything to plug or anything you want to shout out or anything like that?
Shout out to Brad Frost and Ian Frost, my colleagues, AI and Design Systems course, AI and Design Systems. So AI and Design Systems course is great. We're working on wrapping it up now. At the time this goes out, ideally everything would be wrapped up and we'd be working on bonus content. That's one of the hardest parts about making an AI and Design Systems course, is because it feels like you're kind of building the plane as it's flying. So it's the first 2 chapters are all the evergreen stuff. It's the history of AI and how we got here. And then the middle area is kind of the parts that feels like it has staying power, like this context-based design system, AI supported workflows, dabbling into a little bit of the agentic design system discussions. And then there's other sections where we go into deep into tooling and all the tools. So that part is the part that's in 2 months, is this going to be irrelevant? So I see this course as being just kind of a ongoing thing that we'll just keep doing because we like it and it's awesome. It helps us to stay in touch with what's out there. And then outside of that, Southleft is doing amazing things with AI and design systems, helping organizations both take them out of vibe code land and then make sense of what they vibe coded and reverse engineer those into actual design systems with AI supported methods. But then also taking traditional design systems that may have maybe got a little design system rot. Maybe there's some poor hygiene that's been left unattended in your design system, and then cleaning that stuff up and then applying some agentic or AI supported workflows to those. So go ahead and take a look at Southleft and see a lot of the stuff that they're doing. And then outside of that is just my Substack and my LinkedIn. I frequently post things and a lot of commentary about current state of AI and design systems, and no hot takes or anything. It's usually just this, how I see it through my lens.
I was about to say, TJ's gonna have a hot take where it's design systems dead. because of AI?
Not yet. No,
Uh,
as of right now, I don't know, and I see blue skies for design systems. Like there's a whole nother topic that we can get into of like life after design systems. I have this 3-part series that I had written for Zero Heights blog, and it just kind of talks about like design systems in 2 years are going to be table stakes. Like it's like good product companies should all have design systems in place that are AI ready in order for us to get to this next state, which is like Josh Clark has a great book that just came out called Sentient Design. Josh Clark and Veronica Kindred, and it kind of tackles a lot of this topic, and it's really good. I highly recommend everybody take a look at it. And it moves into this world of like ephemeral and radically adaptive UI, and I think that's kind of where things are headed at. Not for every product, but for a lot of products.
Sounds good. Again, thank you again, TJ, to kind of join us for this conversation. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on, and love the show.
We want to thank you for tuning into this episode. For more content, feel free to explore our previous episodes on codeandpixels.fm. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to connect with us on social media at Code and Pixels FM. Y'all have a great day.